Hi, everyone. In this video, I'm going to go over some of the focuses of week 2. So particularly, we're going to talk about how to use evidence in academic writing. I'm going to go over a particular writing technique that will help you incorporate evidence in your writing. And finally, I'll give you a brief preview of text 3, which is the reading for this week. Let's start by analyzing some of the evidence that was used in text 2. I want to show you 3 examples of how the author used evidence, starting with case studies. So here at the top, you can see that the author is explaining a case study about Scott and his father. A case study is evidence in the form of looking at one individual and their circumstances. The advantages of case studies are that it shows the reader a window into the life and circumstances of one individual. And because of that, it often makes a strong emotional connection with the reader. One disadvantage is that it's only showing you the circumstances of one person. So a case study may not be a good representation of what's going on with an overall population. So for example, just because Scott isn't able to afford a house like his father, that doesn't mean that all millennials are not able to buy homes faster than their parents. At the bottom of the screen, there's another example. This time, the author is using research that was conducted by another institution. So in this case, the author is showing us some data from the Pew Research Center, which is a reputable organization that studies topics in lots of different fields. And finally, the author uses statistics in the article. Statistics are a great way to show what's going on in a large population. So they kind of cover the disadvantage of the case studies. However, they're not quite as emotional because it's not really telling you a story about one particular individual. It's more of a high-level snapshot of what's going on with a larger sample size or a larger population. In summary, there's basically 2 types of evidence that you can use in academic essays. The first kind is quantitative evidence. So that just means anything that you can put a number to. So examples of quantitative evidence would be statistics, figures, raw numbers. And then on the other side, there's qualitative data. Qualitative data just refers to anything about the human experience. It's more experiential data. So examples of this would be case studies, quoting or paraphrasing other authors, interviews. And in your academic essays, you need to be using a balance of both. That's how you present the best kind of evidence in your essays. And your evidence should come from credible research and sources. Moving on, I'd like to go over a writing technique that we'll be focusing on this week, and that is the technique of paraphrasing. Let's talk about what paraphrasing is, why we do it, and then I'll show you some examples of how to paraphrase in your writing. First of all, paraphrasing is when you take a sentence from another author or from a source and you rewrite it in your own words. Paraphrasing is good for when you want to include some facts, some figures, some statistics. And usually what you're doing is you're taking one sentence and you're rewriting it into your own. So it's a one-to-one sentence. So it's different from summarizing, which would be taking the main idea of an entire text and boiling it down into one sentence. It is necessary to cite your paraphrase, even though you're rewriting the information in your own words. You either need to introduce the author at the beginning of the paraphrase or at the end by putting their last name in parentheses. Also, if the source has a page number, you should include the page number. So for text 2, there is no page number because this comes from a news site on the internet with no pages, so it's not necessary. And then, of course, at the end of your essay, you would add the full reference on the works cited page. So that would include not just the author's name, but also the publication date, the title of the work, the organization in which the text was published, and some other information depending on what kind of source you use. Okay, so why not just quote? What makes paraphrasing different from quoting and using the exact words of an author? Paraphrases are easy to integrate into your paragraph. So since you're rewriting it in your own words, you don't have to worry about the quote um, making grammatical sense in the middle of your paragraph. It's a lot easier to just continue with the flow of your writing if you paraphrase. Also, by paraphrasing an author, you're showing your reader that you understand what the author is saying. You understand the source material. So in that way, you can kind of build more credibility in the eyes of your reader. Okay, so here's an example of a paraphrase. On the left side, you can see the original sentence from text 2, and on the right side, there's a paraphrase of this original sentence. Notice how in the paraphrase, they begin by introducing the author. And because they do that at the beginning, it's not necessary to put the author's last name in parentheses at the end of the sentence. And notice a couple of things that they do in the paragraph. First of all, they explain that Luby is using Federal Reserve data, and they do this at the beginning, whereas in the original sentence, this was done at the end. So that's a nice technique, kind of shifting the order of ideas, presenting the ideas in a different order. Also, notice how they don't use the terms millennials or Gen X from the original. Instead, they change the wording. So instead of writing millennials, they use this term current young adults. And instead of saying Gen X, they say the generation before. So these are nice substitutions. Now, take a look at this example. Take a moment. Does it represent the original sentence in terms of meaning? Does it give credit to the author? And does this person do a good enough job of changing the words, substituting the words? You will probably notice that they didn't make any reference to the author, so that needs to either be done at the beginning of the sentence or at the end. Also, some steps could be taken to change some of the wording. Here's two examples that I want to highlight, this 51% and this phrase to be homeowners. Take a moment and see if you can think of another way to rewrite these two words, phrases. And here's an example of some substitutions. So for example, instead of just repeating the original sentence and saying 51%, you could change that to more than half. And again, instead of using the exact same wording from the original sentence to say to be homeowners, you could switch that to purchase a house. These are just a few examples of how you can Take the original words and phrases and put them into your own. So for this week, you will notice that there's a paraphrasing activity. This is an optional activity. What I've done is I've given you a couple of sentences that include facts and key statistics from text two. On the right-hand side of that Google Doc, you'll be able to edit the document and include your own writing. So try to paraphrase two or three of these sentences. It's not necessary to put your name. You can just practice anonymously. And a little bit later in the week, I'll come back into the document and I'll make some comments and give some feedback to see if these paraphrases are good paraphrases, or if we need to improve them a little bit in terms of substituting words or changing the order of ideas, or if we've forgotten to give credit to the author. So feel free to try those activities. Also, in your reading reflection for this week, see if you can include at least one paragraph in your reflection. Excuse me, one paraphrase in your reflection. And finally, let me introduce the text that we're going to be focusing on this week. We're moving on to text three. Text three was written by Max Roser, who is affiliated with Oxford University. And he studies global trends to kind of determine if we are living in the best conditions that the world has seen historically. So it's going to be, he's going to take kind of a different approach and a different sort of argument than we saw in text one and text two. He's a lot more positive about the trend of living standards and cost of living. And he breaks this down into some different parts, like he talks about poverty and global education and health and literacy. So this is a informational report. So he will write about these topics, but also he's going to show you some graphical information. And the charts are nice because you can manipulate some of the data. You can manipulate the charts to see the information in a variety of representations.